The world is going to consume almost twice as much energy 30 years from now as it does today. Climate change is coming, and so we need to actually innovate ahead of that, the negative effects. We need innovation that gives us energy that's cheaper than today's hydrocarbon energy, that has zero CO2 emission, and is as reliable as today's overall energy system. And it's when you put all those requirements together, you go, wow, that we need an energy miracle. Now, that may make it seem too daunting to people, but miracles in science, miracles are happening all the time.
So what you're essentially looking to do is for the civilization to skip a step, move forward and accelerate the transition, move beyond natural gas to other carbon neutral forms of energy. Have we ever done something that big as a species before?
Well, sort of no, because the scale of it's very big. It's unprecedented to move this quickly to change a infrastructure of this scale. Almost everything that's been invented in energy was invented more than 20 years before it got scaled usage. There's this guy Parsons, who nobody knows, who took us from the steam engine to the steam turbine, which is 1890, this unbelievable advance. It wasn't used significantly in his lifetime. A guy named Diesel invents the diesel engine. Brilliant idea. It doesn't catch on. He commits suicide, jumps off a boat. Now, later, it catches on. In the case of climate change, because there's so many possible solutions, it's not like the Manhattan Project where we're saying, I don't think anyone's saying, hey, pick just one approach and pick some ranch in New Mexico and just have those guys kind of hang out there. Here, we want to give a little bit of money to the wild-eyed guy who thinks that high wind will work. We want to give a little bit of money to the guy who thinks taking sunlight and making oil directly out of sunlight will work. That's the kind of thing that we should be funding more of.
Talk a little bit more about some of the technologies you're most excited about, where you see the greatest potential for a really kind of game-changing breakthrough.
Well, if you talk to most people, they, I think, expect that wind plus solar photovoltaic, solar PV, right, solar electric, isn't that going to eventually come and solve this problem? Now, unfortunately, solar PV is still non-economic, but the biggest problem of all is this intermittency. That is, we need energy 24 hours a day. If somebody is freezing to death in their apartment, we want energy now. We can't say, hey, wait a few days. The primary new zero CO2 sources are intermittent. Now, nuclear is a non-CO2 source, but it's had its own problems in terms of costs, big safety problems, making sure that you can deal with the waste, making sure that the plutonium isn't used to make weapons. I personally, I think we should continue those things, but I think there's many other things, including trying to get rid of nuclear's problems, including the solar chemical approach, including high wind.
So you've been speaking to governments around the world and to private investors, and what are you asking for?
Well, my basic message is let's be realistic about how we're going to get to the 2050 goal. I feel like there's been all this discussion about the 2030, the near-term end goal, which is good, but there are things that have such long lead times, including innovation itself, that if they're part of your 2050 solution, you have to get started now. The rate of innovation should be more than doubled, and the government R&D budgets and private high-risk taking investments are a necessary part of doubling that speed. I'm a big believer in foreign aid, but the climate problem has to be solved in the rich countries. China and the US and Europe have to solve CO2 emission. And when they do, hopefully they'll make it cheap enough for everyone else. Congratulations to Rotary on the 30th anniversary of the Polio Plus program. Thanks to Rotarians' vision in 1985 of a polio-free world and your unwavering commitment and determination, we've made incredible progress. The world has never been in a better position to eradicate polio. 2 of the 3 strains of wild polio are now likely eliminated. India was certified polio-free. And Nigeria and the whole continent of Africa are closer than ever before to becoming polio-free. This progress is due to a tremendous global effort of partners, country governments, and Rotarians around the world. The Gates Foundation is committed to the goal of polio eradication, and we are proud of our amazing partnership with Rotary. As we near the finish line, the work is harder than ever, and Rotary's support is more important than ever. You are vital advocates for polio eradication. Thank you for 3 decades of support for fighting polio and for your ongoing commitment to ensure that no child ever again suffers from this crippling disease. Polio eradication will be a gift for generations to come.
You're famously not a college graduate yourself and left Harvard early to start Microsoft. And I'm curious, because of that, what you think of things like edX and out of Harvard now and MIT, and the idea of giving kind of alternative certificates around these free online materials. What do you think of that model of these kind of educational badges?
Well, at the end of the day, you got to have something that employers really believe in. And today what they believe in, by and large, are degrees. And if you have a great degree, then you're considered for jobs. And if you don't have that degree, there's a lot of jobs you won't get consideration for.
Sure.
And so the question is, can we transform this credentialing process? And in fact, the ideal would be to separate out the idea of proving your knowledge from the way you acquire that knowledge. You know, even though I only have a high school degree, I am a professional student. That is, I like to watch courses and do things online. So, you know, things like OpenCourseWare, the various lectures have been put online. I consume a lot of those because I'm very interested. And I'm always disappointed that the aggregate numbers, whether it's OpenCourseWare or stuff that you pay a little bit of money from, like the Learning Company has amazing lectures, history, economics, science, and I'm an avid consumer of those. The actual market's very small, and it really comes back to this idea of a lot of the reason people spend time in education is because of the job opportunity it creates for them. And so until we break out the credential piece, ideally in a completely separate way, the room for experimentation in terms of how you acquire knowledge won't be very strong. If you have that separate credential, that becomes the new gold standard, where a university, instead of saying what the people who came into the university, how smart they were, they'll talk about how many of them were able to achieve these credentials at the end, which would be based on objective understanding of the subject matter.
Do you think this could work as well in fields like humanities fields where it's harder to measure mastery?
Well, there's a lot of fields where things are fairly objective. And if you want to be a nurse, a doctor, there's various exams that are given for those things. There are softer areas like, you know, you want to be a salesman or something, but it's not even clear what college degree is appropriate for that. Employers have decided that having the breadth of knowledge that's associated with a 4-year degree is often something they want to see in the people they give that job to. And so instead of testing for that particular profession, they'll be testing that you have that broad exposure. Well, without Rotary, this polio campaign wouldn't be anywhere. And the incredible effort that's been made from the very beginning is really unprecedented. You can't think of an organization that's put its reputation on the line and taken all of its capabilities, having volunteers, having a voice about the importance. It's really an unbelievable thing. And so as I've learned about it, gotten more active myself, partnering with Rotary has been fantastic. If we stop the intense efforts, then polio wouldn't just stay down at a few thousand cases, it would go back to several 100,000. And so the cost of that, the suffering, the terrible loss that would be created by that is really unbearable. And so we need to push and get this thing to the final case. Well, I'm sure when my dad was involved, I had some sense, he's very much a community-involved person, and kind of set me on a path to think about the community and giving back once I wasn't totally just doing my Microsoft stuff. Well, polio is the thing I spend the most time on, and I'm very passionate about it because I can see a great chance of success, but without redoubling the efforts, I know it won't come easily. And so I've gotten to go to Nigeria, go to India. I've gotten to meet with the health ministers of all the affected countries. They were gathered recently in Geneva for a big meeting. And I've gotten to talk to the donor countries about moving forward. So it's an exciting movement. It's a movement that we need scientists, we need politicians, we need people who understand how to reach out to entire communities, even the people that are hardest to find. So it's an amazing group, and I'm enjoying it. Making sure that we do everything we can right it's very exciting. I keep asking myself, are we doing everything we can? Are we mobilizing the scientists and the fundraising? Did we do all the campaigns? Did we cut corners that we shouldn't have? Because it's so black and white at the end of the day, and we need momentum. For example, the progress that we're making in India will really show people that was for a long time viewed as the country that would be the most difficult, and now we've got an amazing situation there. So it is exciting to be part of this. It'll be even more exciting when we've got the thing done. In the educational sector, Lund University has actually developed something that I was very impressed with, because it actually takes our technology in a new direction. And it's a learning facility which applies not just in the educational environment, but in the business environment for training as well. Training is a huge business cost, and yet I don't think any business is satisfied with their ability to keep their employees up to date and motivate them by having them have access to the latest training. And the digital approach here means that the student they can pick when they want to interact, they can go back and review the materials, they can test their competence very easily. And so it's mixing together things like NetShow, which is about digital video presentation, things like PowerPoint, and the quizzing modules that have been built into this virtual interactive tool. So it's the acronym for this is the LUVIT, and it's a very state-of-the-art piece of work.
I am here with Bill Gates. We know him from Microsoft. We now know him for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Bill, it's great to see you. Great to see you here in particular because we know the Gates Foundation for its work on infectious diseases, child health, nutrition, agriculture, education, the list goes on. Why does Bill Gates care about finance?
Well, it's all about helping the poorest. And one thing they don't have access to is bank accounts. The fee structure, if you have small amounts of money, is just too high. And we got involved in some traditional microlending, but just didn't see how that could scale up and get inexpensive enough. So now we're involved in trying to make sure we get a very efficient digital payment structure set up for all the poorest in the world to get financial products that work for them.
What are you doing?
The idea is that typically through the cell phone, you should be able to send money to your relatives. You should be able to track the money that's coming in, set aside money to buy seeds the next year. And there are countries where this is beginning to take off. Kenya, Bangladesh, even Somalia, maybe the last country you'd suspect up in Somaliland, almost half of the GDP is done digitally.
I don't need to tell you that the poor have been unbanked for as long as there have been banks. Why is this time different?
Well, it's really the digital revolution. The poorest have bought cows, stored gold, put currency under their mattress, but they are getting cell phones. And the cell phone capability of identifying who's using the cell phone, letting you look at your spending patterns, that's going to be common sense. People are going to have help and lots of innovative products competing on top of this digital currency platform.
So if technology, mobile phones for example, digital money, helps to increase access to financial services at the same time as it lowers the cost of delivery, why is philanthropy needed?
Philanthropy should just be here to bootstrap this. There are a lot of regulations in this area, and understanding how those regulations can make the cost of remittances, where you're sending money back to your family in your country of origin, how right now that has about a 5% overhead on it. We think we have a role to make sure that, particularly for the smaller transactions, the regulations don't impose those very high costs. Once this gets going, then we'll step up to the applications and say, okay, how does a savings application help the mother make sure money's focused on the kids? How does it help them stay in school, set money aside for the uniform or for good future planning?
Some of what you just described, the need to move money from place to place, the cost of doing so, the overhead, as you put it, makes me think, believe it or not, of Bitcoin, because some people have said, hey, Bitcoin is the answer to those problems. Are you a believer?
Well, Bitcoin is exciting because it shows how cheap it can be. Bitcoin is better than currency in that you don't have to be physically in the same place. And, of course, for large transactions, currency can get pretty inconvenient. The customers we're talking about aren't trying to be anonymous. They're willing to be known. So the Bitcoin technology is key, and you could add to it or you could build a similar technology where there's enough attribution that people feel comfortable. This has nothing to do with terrorism or any type of money laundering.
What kinds of people or private enterprises right now are helping to solve the same problems you're interested in?
Well, in some countries, the mobile companies have been fantastic. In a few other companies, it's been the banks. In some countries, it's a startup company that's neither a bank nor a mobile company. In Bangladesh, the bKash offering runs across any phone, and they've gotten the regulations so that they have a product that we think will get very, very pervasive. So entrepreneurs are there. The enablement this creates, if you want to put in, say, electricity in a city, collecting your bills is one of the reasons why the underspending of infrastructure in these areas is a real thing holding back the economy.
You mentioned banks. Are the legacy institutions, for the most part, banks, credit card companies, payment processors, friend or foe?
Many of them want
to have these additional customers, but they have to embrace the idea that the fees are going to be a lot lower. And so they have to find a way to service these new customers. Now, that means these customers aren't going to be coming into their branches, and they can charge a higher fee when you want to actually cash out. But if it's a pure digital transaction, then you should be paying less than 1% to move that money from you to a merchant or from you to a friend, even with meeting all the regulatory requirements.
I'm very excited about the choice of Satya Nadella to be the CEO of Microsoft. Microsoft has a long history of innovation, going back to the beginning where the vision of the personal computer was something that Microsoft helped bring to life. Our vision of a platform that software developers could thrive by building on really initiated the entire software industry. We brought forward graphics interface, we took advantage of the internet, so as the industry changes, we have to innovate and move forward. Satya's got the right background to lead the company during this era. There's a challenge in mobile computing. There's an opportunity in the cloud. And the various business groups he's worked in, he's driven innovation, gotten architectures put together that really meet the needs of our customers. The opportunity for Microsoft is greater than ever before, whether it's taking Office and bringing it to interactive documents, letting you find your information in rich ways, securing your information in rich ways, or even building a new platform, a cloud platform that connects to all sorts of different devices. I'm thrilled that Satya's asked me to step up, substantially increasing the time that I spend at the company. I'll have over a third of my time available to meet with product groups, and it'll be fun to define this next round of products working together. So there's a lot of opportunity in front of us, and it's exciting that we've got a strong leader to take us there. Well, now let me turn to a second question. And this is, how do you make a teacher great? Now, it seems like the kind of question that people would spend a lot of time on and that we'd understand very well. And the answer is, really, that we don't. When I first learned the statistics, I was pretty stunned at how bad things are. Over 30% of kids never finish high school. For minority kids, it's over 50%. If you're low income in the United States, you have a higher chance of going to jail than you do of getting a four-year degree. And that, doesn't seem entirely fair. So how do you make education better? But the more we looked at it, the more we realized that having great teachers was the very key thing. How much variation is there between teachers? Between, say, the top quartile, the very best, and the bottom quartile? And the answer is that these variations are absolutely unbelievable. A top quartile teacher will increase the performance of their class based on test scores by over 10% in a single year. What does that mean? Well, that means if the entire US for 2 years had top quartile teachers, the entire difference between us and Asia would go away. And within 4 years, we would be blowing everyone in the world away. A good example of one is a set of charter schools called KIPP. And what goes on is great teaching. They take the poorest kids, and over 96% of their high school graduates go to four-year colleges. They're team teaching. They're constantly improving their teachers. They're taking data, the test scores, and saying to a teacher, hey, you caused this amount of increase. And so they're deeply engaged in making teaching better. When you actually go and sit in one of these classrooms, at first it's very bizarre. And the teacher was constantly scanning to see which kids weren't paying attention, which kids were bored, and calling on kids rapidly, putting things up on the board. It was a very dynamic environment. I'm optimistic about this. I think there's some clear things we can do. First of all, there's a lot more testing going on, and that's given us the picture of where we are. And that allows us to understand
who's doing it well and call them out and find out what those techniques are. Of course, digital video is cheap now. Putting a few cameras in the classroom and saying that things are being recorded on an ongoing basis is very practical in all public schools. And so every few weeks, teachers could sit down and say, okay, here's a little clip of something I thought I did well. Here's a little clip of something I think I did poorly. Advise me when this kid acted up. How should I have dealt with that? And they can all sit and work together on those problems. You can take the very best teachers and kind of annotate it, have it so everyone sees who is the very best teaching this stuff. You can take those great courses and make them available so that a kid could go out and watch the physics course, learn from that. If you have a kid who's behind, you would know you could assign them that video to watch and review the concept. And so by thinking of this as a personnel system, we can do it much better. And we put a lot of money into education, and I really think that education is the most important thing to get right for the country to have as strong a future as it should have. But I'm optimistic. I think people are beginning to recognize how important this is, and it really can make a difference for millions of lives if we get it right. Thank you. Second question, a fairly different question, but I'd say equally important. And this is, how do you make a teacher great? Now, it seems like the kind of question that people would spend a lot of time on and that we'd understand very well. And the answer is, really, that we don't. Let's start with why this is important. Well, all of us here, I'll bet, had some great teachers. We all had a wonderful education. That's part of the reason we're here today, part of the reason we're successful. I can say that, even though I'm a college dropout. I had great teachers. And in fact, in the United States, the teaching system has worked fairly well. There are fairly effective teachers in a narrow set of places. So the top 20% of students have gotten a good education. And those top 20% have been the best in the world if you measure them against the other top 20%. And they've gone on to create the revolutions in software and biotechnology and keep the U.S. at the forefront. Now, the strength for those top 20% is starting to fade on a relative basis, but even more concerning is the education that the balance of people are getting. Not only has that been weak, it's getting weaker. And if you look at the economy, it really is only providing opportunities now to people with a better education. And so we have to change this. We have to change it so that people have equal opportunity. We have to change it so that the country is strong and stays in the forefront of things that are driven by advanced education, like science and mathematics. When I first learned the statistics, I was pretty stunned at how bad things are. Over 30% of kids never finish high school. And that had been covered up for a long time because they always took the dropout rate as the number who started in senior year and then compared it to the number that finished senior year, because they weren't tracking where the kids were before that. But most of the dropouts had taken place before that. And so they had to raise the stated dropout rate as soon as that tracking was done to over 30%. For minority kids, it's over 50%. And even if you graduate from high school, if you're low income, you have less than a 25% chance of ever completing a college degree. If you're low income in the United States, you have a higher chance of going to jail than you do of getting a four-year degree. And that, doesn't seem entirely fair. So how do you make education better? Our foundation for the last 9 years has invested in this. There's many people working on it. We've worked on small schools. We've funded scholarships. We've done things in libraries. A lot of these things had a good effect. But the more we looked at it, the more we realized that having great teachers was the very key thing. And so we hooked up with some people studying how much variation is there between teachers, between, say, the top quartile, the very best, and the bottom quartile. How much variation is there within a school or between schools? And the answer is that these variations are absolutely unbelievable. A top quartile teacher will increase the performance of their class based on test scores by over 10% in a single year. What does that mean? Well, that means if the entire U.S. for 2 years had top quartile teachers, the entire difference between us and Asia would go away. And within 4 years, we would be blowing everyone in the world away. So it's simple. All you need is those top quartile teachers. And so you'd say, well, wow, that's good. We should reward those people. We should retain those people. We should find out what they're doing and transfer that skill to other people. But I can tell you that absolutely is not happening today. What are the characteristics of this top quartile? What do they look like? You might think, well, these must be very senior teachers. And the answer is no. Once somebody is taught for 3 years, their teaching quality does not change thereafter. The variation is very, very small. You might think, well, these are people with master's degrees. They've gone back and they've gotten their master's of education. This chart takes 4 different factors and says, how much do they explain teaching quality? That bottom thing, which says there's no effect at all, is a master's degree. Now, the way the pay system works is there's 2 things that are rewarded. One is seniority, because your pay goes up and you vest into your pension. And the second is giving extra money to people who get their master's degree. But it in no way is associated with being a better teacher. Teach for America, slight effect. For math teachers, majoring in math is a measurable effect. But overwhelmingly, it's your past performance. There are some people who are very good at this. And we've done almost nothing to study what that is and to draw it in, to replicate it, to raise the average capability, or to encourage the people with it to stay in the system. You might say, well, do the good teachers stay and the bad teachers leave? The answer is, on average, the slightly better teachers leave the system, and it's a system with very high turnover. Now, there are a few places, very few, where great teachers are being made. A good example of one is a set of charter schools called KIPP. KIPP means knowledge is power. It's an unbelievable thing. They have 66 schools, mostly middle schools, 7 high schools, and what goes on is great teaching. They take the poorest kids, and over 96% of their high school graduates go to 4-year colleges. And the whole spirit and attitude in those schools is very different than in the normal public school. They're team teaching. They're constantly improving their teachers. They're taking data, the test scores, and saying to a teacher, hey, you caused this amount of increase. And so they're deeply engaged in making teaching better. When you actually go and sit in one of these classrooms, at first it's very bizarre. I sat down and I thought, what is going on? The teacher was running around and the energy level's high. I thought, well, I'm in the sports rally or something. What's going on? And the teacher was constantly scanning to see which kids weren't paying attention, which kids were bored, and calling on kids rapidly, putting things up on the board. It was a very dynamic environment because particularly in those middle school years, 5th through 8th grade, keeping people engaged and setting the tone that everybody in the classroom needs to pay attention. Nobody gets to make fun of it or have the position of, the kid who doesn't want to be there. Everybody needs to be involved. And so KIPP is doing it. How does that compare to a normal school? Well, in a normal school, teachers aren't told how good they are. The data isn't gathered. In the teacher's contract, it will limit the number of times the principal can come into the classroom, sometimes to once per year. And they need advance notice to do that. So imagine running a factory where you've got these workers, some of them just making crap, and the management is told, hey, you can only come down here once a year, but you need to let us know because we might actually fool you and try and do a good job in that one brief moment. Even a teacher who wants to improve doesn't have the tools to do it. They don't have the test scores. And there's a whole thing of trying to block the data. For example, New York passed a law that said that the teacher improvement data could not be made available and used in the tenure decision for the teachers. And so that's sort of working in the opposite direction. But I'm optimistic about this. I think there's some clear things we can do. First of all, there's a lot more testing going on, and that's given us the picture of where we are. And that allows us to understand who's doing it well and call them out and find out what those techniques are. Of course, digital video is cheap now. Putting a few cameras in the classroom and saying that things are being recorded on an ongoing basis is very practical in all public schools. And so every few weeks, teachers could sit down and say, okay, here's a little clip of something I thought I did well. Here's a little clip of something I think I did poorly. Advise me when this kid acted up. How should I have dealt with that? And they can all sit and work together on those problems. You can take the very best teachers and kind of annotate it, have it so everyone sees who is the very best teaching this stuff. You can take those great courses and make them available so that a kid could go out and watch the physics course, learn from that. If you have a kid who's behind, you would know you could assign them that video to watch and review the concept. And in fact, these free courses could not only be available just on the internet, but you could make it so that DVDs were always available, and so anybody who has access to a DVD player can have the very best teachers. And so by thinking of this as a personnel system, we can do it much better. There's a book actually about KIPP, the place that this is going on, that Jay Matthews, a Newsweek reporter, wrote called Work Hard, Be Nice. And I thought it was so fantastic, it gave you a sense of what a good teacher does. I'm going to send everyone here a free copy of this book. Now, we put a lot of money into education, and I really think that education is the most important thing to get right for the country to have as strong a future as it should have. In fact, we have in the stimulus bill, it's interesting, the House version actually had money in it for these data systems, and was taken out in the Senate because there are people who are threatened by these things. But I'm optimistic. I think people are beginning to recognize how important this is, and it really can make a difference for millions of lives if we get it right.
Hi, my name is Ksenia Gankina, and I was born in Russia, and I'm now a second-year student at Columbia Business School. My question is for Mr. Gates. What industry do you think is going to produce the next Bill Gates? Because that's the industry I want to get a job in.
Industries do have different paces of innovation, and so the IT industry, driven by the magic of software, the magic of the optic fiber, the magic of the chip, which doubles in power every couple of years, it's been the industry that has not only been the most exciting, it's also changed the rules for many other industries. You know, the idea of information being available, what the online world is like, that's incredible. I'd say there are a few other industries that will compete for being exciting in the decades ahead. The energy business, some approach will provide cheaper energy that's environmentally friendly. And there's a lot of science, a lot of business. It's a global thing. There'll be some great careers there.
Are you and Melinda and your investment chief, Michael Larson, as focused as you have been on generating returns so that the foundation has more money to give away? And for that matter, you know, your private investments, or is now a time to think more about capital preservation?
I'm bullish on the U.S. businesses and global businesses. So we're not in some defensive posture where we're mostly in cash or anything like that. The strategy that's been used on the investments is to be over 60% in equities. And
that's still the case?
No, that's still the case. Well, AFD has a strong history through its 75 years of working closely with these countries. And AFD understands the capacity, the priorities of the countries. And so the Gates Foundation is pleased we have a partnership with AFD to take areas like agriculture and health and contraceptive usage, and bring the strengths of the two organizations together. So we know a lot about getting the price of the vaccines down or helping new vaccines to be invented, and then working with AFD, who understands the primary healthcare system in a lot of countries, including Francophone Africa. Yeah, the partnership between Gates Foundation and AFD includes all the different areas of health, of which nutrition's a very big thing, contraceptive use, vaccines, HIV medicines, malaria bed nets. Health is a huge area and the biggest set of programs for our foundation. Agriculture is also very important, so a lot we're doing there. If we can up the productivity of these farmers, then they can save money, and they can deal with both today's weather that's very tough for them and the even tougher weather that unfortunately climate change will force them to deal with. We also have financial services, making sure people can save money and borrow money, and some ways of using the cell phone to help with that. Then also sanitation. As you get these big cities, if you don't deal with the sanitation, there's all sorts of health problems that come out of that. Well, the goal of AFD to help all these people in the poor countries to have equality, to have what all of us take for granted. And it's fantastic to see the awareness of the French people and the ongoing support they're providing for AFD, even in tough budget times, saying let's keep this budget not only strong, let's find extra resources, being creative with things like the financial transaction tax, the airline tax, various things that have allowed France to keep a strong commitment to help all these people. So that goal is the same goal that we have. The ideal would be to put ourselves out of business, that is, to have the health and education in these countries be so strong that neither the Gates Foundation or AFD are necessary. And if you take the long-term view and you look at these trends, I think sometime between now and 75 years from now, that really can be achieved. Joyeux anniversaire, AFD. Israel is, by many measures, the country relative to its population that's done the most to contribute to the technology revolution. It's almost like a part of Silicon Valley.
Let's plug it in. It's going to say, hey, I see you plugged in a new device, and it's going to load in the appropriate drivers. You'll notice that this scanner build, whoa. Moving right along.
That must be why we're not shipping Windows 98 yet.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
For example, there's more money put into baldness drugs than are put into malaria. Now, baldness it's a terrible thing. And rich men are afflicted. And so that's why that priority has been set. But malaria, even the 1 million deaths a year caused by malaria, greatly understate its impact. Over 200 million people at any one time are suffering from it. It means that you can't get the economies in these areas going because it holds things back so much. Now, malaria is, of course, transmitted by mosquitoes. I brought some here so you could experience this. We'll let those roam around the auditorium a little bit. There's no reason only poor people should have the experience. Those mosquitoes are not infected.
So, to mic number 2, sir, please ask your question.
Good morning. My question is with the SharePoint Online services, this opens a big door for competition now. in the past few weeks, Google announced that they have this thing called Google Team Edition. So obviously, personally, I think SharePoint's far more superior. What's Microsoft's plan in being ahead of the competition, and more importantly, gaining better adoption at the end user level?
In terms of, not to overstate it, but they really don't understand the special needs of business. Today, their economic model is based on consumer search and having done an incredible job there, and obviously we're investing in challenging them in that space, making sure that even as it grows, gets to be more competitive than it is today. If you've seen with the Google tools that have tried to do productivity type things, they really don't have the richness, the responsiveness, and you can see the relative success they've had there. For most of these Google products, to be frank, the day they announce them is their best day. And then after that, well, I might be biased.
I agree with you.
So you should check into what's really happened with various of these things. I remember there was one called G-Talk. I can barely remember the name, but it was so it was going to change the world. And so it's healthy that there are many choices that people have here. The breadth of what needs to be done to create something like SharePoint is very, very high. But then again, we want to meet your test where your end users are really pushing you even a little bit to say, hey, we're not using it for budgeting. We're not using it for personnel review. We're not using it for sales analysis. Why are we just using SharePoint over here? I want to be empowered to use it across a wider range of capabilities.
All right, we have time. There's lots of questions. Unfortunately, we have time for one more question.
When I was a child, I got to go to the World Expo in 1962 in my hometown, Seattle. There was a lot of great technology there. It really was very inspirational. Expos, going back in history, have let people see new innovations, let them think about how's that going to change life, get people excited, get them to participate in different approaches. And so it brings people together, it gets us dreaming, and so it's a great institution. UAE has taken its success and been willing to invest in new learning, new innovation. It's great to see that kind of long-term approach is part of how they're taking their success and becoming a hub of people from different regions. A lot of gathering is done here because they're a place that's looking forward, a place everybody's willing to come and work together. The digital world is magical. But I don't think it's going to replace meetings or expos any time during my lifetime. Dubai, as part of the UAE, has modernized itself, taken on tough projects, brought people together in a number of amazing ways, and I think they would be a great location for a World Expo. I'm proud to be a partner in the work that Rotary has been doing to eradicate polio. I'm well aware that the reason we're even able to have a discussion about how to eradicate polio is because Rotary's efforts have helped get us 99% of the way there. Because of you, there are many places where polio is thought of as a disease of the past. Now that's both a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that for it to be a disease of the past means no child is being affected. The curse is that it makes it more difficult to raise awareness that in some places polio is still a disease of the present. And if we fail to help leaders around the world know this, polio will still be a disease in the future. Now, none of this would have been achieved without Rotary International.
We would not be where we are without you, nor can we get to where we're going without you. This last 1% will be the longest, hardest 1%. It will require more work and commitment than ever before. But I'm 100% convinced that this fight is winnable. I think the innovation that would be most important for the world is a way of generating electricity that's less than half as expensive as the way we do it today, but that has no bad environmental effects. In particular, emits no CO2. A key element to get an energy breakthrough is more basic research, and that requires the government to take the lead. Only when that research is pointing towards a product, then we can expect the private sector to kick in. But we're missing the basic innovation that would get us this whole new way of making energy. If the Council's recommendations are put into place, then we'll be moving full speed to do the research during this next decade. And so by 2030, we'd be in a position to change the transportation infrastructure so that it's a zero carbon approach, and to change the electricity infrastructure so it's also a zero carbon approach. I think we need to do a better job taking the tough and interesting problems and mapping that back to the science you learn. You know, why learn physics, chemistry, material science? Well, the answer is that it will let you participate in these breakthroughs. And it should be fascinating. It should be drawing in about 10 times as many people as it is today. We need a lot of bright minds. This is fun work.
Please introduce
Okay.
yourself, just in case.
All right. I'm Bill Gates.
That's short.
All right. I'm Bill Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
That's good for me. What about
That's
you?
good for us.
Yeah. Okay. I know you're used to this exercise, but very, very quick reminder. I will ask you to look at me all the time and never at the camera or anyone else. And my voice will not be heard once the short movie is edited. So if you can just replace in context my questions, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. And obviously it's pretty impressive to be facing you, so I'll try to do my best. So to start, in a world where inequalities are always growing, unfortunately, how can we contribute to reducing poverty and social exclusion in the coming years?
Well, what's amazing is how much progress we've made on very basic inequalities. So if we go back 25 years, over 10% of children died before the age of 5. Now we've cut that in half. We're down to less than 5%. Obviously, we still have work to do. We shouldn't have poor children at such great risk of dying. They should have the same benefits as the kids living in developed countries. But we've come a long ways. If we look at life expectancy, we look at literacy, we look at women having access to contraception when they want it. On all these key development factors, we really have made great progress. And so the incomes of the poor countries have been going up faster. You know, it's great that the press reminds us of all the things yet to be done, but as we plan for the years ahead, we should remember there is incredible success. And so accelerating things like access to HIV medicine to save the life of people who have AIDS, accelerating the access to the latest vaccines so that kids don't die of diarrhea or pneumonia. Those are things that we do have success stories, and we can do even more.
Well, actually, you said we can do even more. So how does the Gates Foundation and AFD can work together?
Well, AFD has a strong history through its 75 years of working closely with these countries. And
AFD understands the capacity, the priorities of the countries. And so the Gates Foundation is pleased we have a partnership with AFD to take areas like agriculture and health and contraceptive usage and bring the strengths of the two organizations together. So we know a lot about getting the price of the vaccines down or helping new vaccines to be invented. And then working with AFD, who understands the primary healthcare system in a lot of countries, including Francophone Africa, we can say what's a realistic goal. And it's really a three-way partnership because the recipient country, they in the long run are going to have to take responsibility. So it's really helping them achieve their goals using the strengths of the two institutions.
So those are the sectors you want to focus on for the 10 coming years?
Yeah, the partnership between Gates Foundation and AFD includes all the different areas of health, of which nutrition's a very big thing, contraceptive use, vaccines, HIV medicines, malaria bed nets. Health is a huge area and the biggest set of programs for our foundation. Agriculture is also very important, so a lot we're doing there. If we can up the productivity of these farmers, then they can save money and they can deal with both today's weather that's very tough for them and the even tougher weather that unfortunately climate change will force them to deal with. We also have financial services, making sure people can save money and borrow money, and some ways of using the cell phone to help with that. Then also sanitation. As you get these big cities, if you don't deal with the sanitation, there's all sorts of health problems that come out of that. So we're picking areas that overlap between the organizations. We both care a lot about Africa, so that's the main geography we'll be working in together. And then setting ambitious goals. We did this with the Ouagadougou partnership about women getting access to contraception, and that went well. We actually beat our goals, so we're expanding that. In some cases, we work with multilateral groups like Gavi, where AFD helped provide some financing for those breakthrough vaccines.
And I guess, what would be your wish for AFD's 75th anniversary?
Well, the goal of AFD is a super important one. It's to help all these people in the poor countries to have equality, to have what all of us take for granted. And it's fantastic to see the awareness of the French people and the ongoing support they're providing for AFD, even in tough budget times, saying let's keep this budget not only strong, let's find extra resources, being creative with things like the financial transaction tax, the airline tax, various things that have allowed France to keep a strong commitment to help all these people. So that goal is the same goal that we have. The ideal would be to put ourselves out of business. That is, to have the health and education in these countries be so strong that neither the Gates Foundation or AFD are necessary. And if you take the long-term view and you look at these trends, I think sometime between now and 75 years from now, that really can be achieved.
I wish so again, also. Well, thank you very much. Just one last thing before I let you go, I guess. Can you wish a happy anniversary to AFD in French? Do you need some help to do this in French?
Well, I'll try, and then we can do it again if I don't do it well. Joyeux anniversaire, AFD.
Bravo. That sounds very good to me.
All right.
Is there anything else you want to add before we go?
No, it's good. I think we hit the key things.
Thank you very much for your time.
When it comes to making the world a better place, talented young people like yourself are the world's most important asset. And that's good news for Nigeria because it has one of the biggest young populations in the world. It's continuing to grow. And that represents, with the right investments, a lot of incredible skills and passion to tackle these tough problems. even better basis. That is very, very important to us. When we think about working with universities, it's not just the computer science department. It's really very broad because of the role that software is playing. And you see this trend in terms of the interdepartmental work that goes on in the university today. If we think of the sciences, any science, but let's take biology as a particular example, the amount of data that they're dealing with has gotten huge. And so insights into the working of disease or the brain or any biological system requires very state-of-the-art software systems. And so we have to understand from these biologists, how do they want to represent the proteomic data, the genomic data? What sorts of searches do they want to do? And bring the very best software techniques to those problems. We have an initiative that we call the Technical Computing Initiative, which is to reach out and understand those problems and even have some of our top researchers work in that area. I've got one example I want to show you, which is the idea of looking at the brain and the connections in the brain. And this particular collaboration is with Jeff Lichtman, who's at Harvard. And so quickly we'll run a little video where he'll talk about the challenge that he's facing, and then I'll talk about how collaboration with state-of-the-art software can be an element of the breakthroughs he's looking for.
I'd like to tell you today about an exciting collaboration that's just starting up between me and several of my colleagues in the Center for Brain Science at Harvard University and another group at Harvard University in the Initiative for Innovative Computing with Microsoft. We know less about our brains, actually, than any other part of our body. And I would even go farther than that. I would say we know less about our brains than anything that human beings know about. It's that mysterious. For us to understand many disease processes and the way the normal brain works, we really need a wiring diagram of a brain. You would need a hard disk that is approximately 1 million petabytes. And many of you don't know what a petabyte is, I bet. A petabyte is 1,000 terabytes. And a terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes. So one human brain requires 1,000 billion gigabyte hard disks. So we're going to start even smaller than that and look at a little cubic millimeter of a mouse brain. That's about a petabyte of data. That's almost manageable today, and we've built a radically new kind of microtome to shave off one layer after another in little volumes like that, put them on tape, and then image them. And we were very pleased that Microsoft already has developed several tools that are really wonderful to get us started. And I want to...
All right, let's take a look at how software can help with this problem. So this is one of those slices that he talked about where they're going in at a very, very thin layer-by-layer basis and acquiring essentially image data that then they want to put into a software system and start to do some recognition to understand these various connections. So we can see this image here, and what we've got is a piece of software we call HD View that lets you navigate in this image in a very rapid way. We can zoom in, see different things, and this is using the kind of graphics capability and bandwidth that are now available to create new types of visualization. So it's not just a set of static photos, it's a structured database view. One way you can see that is we're seeing it on edge, so you can see these different layers. I can take one and put it into focus, and then I'm stepping through here and looking at layer by layer. But by having this in a database and providing certain operations that are very efficient, now we can take and do sort of the equivalent of visual recognition, where we look and we try and find boundaries. This is an image processing algorithm applied to this. And then we take a machine learning approach to try and take those boundaries and figure out what the different features are, and then start to fill those in. And so this is the kind of thing that will eventually give us that, what he called connectome, that database, and that we can start to reason about that. How does it change over time? How does it represent things? This, of course, is one of the more complex areas that will take lots and lots of work, but only with software can we be optimistic about the progress that will get made here. So broadly, from astronomy to particle physics to biology, in the same way that mathematics was the handmaiden of the sciences up through the 1900s, now software and very rich systems are the handmaiden today. And we love this because these scientific problems actually take our software and push it to new limits. And many of the things that we invent here for technical computing are actually very applicable as we move into the broader commercial spaces. We look at data mining and patterns and parallel computing. And so to have this to kind of push the limits is very, very important. When we think about new energy systems that are environmentally friendly, or we think about the designs of vaccines, it's going to be state-of-the-art software combined with domain experts that really make the big breakthroughs there. Another big important thing for us in terms of innovation is reaching out to students and making sure that they have access to the latest software tools. Over 26 billion tons. For each American, it's about 20 tons. For people in poor countries, it's less than 1 ton. It's an average about 5 tons for everyone on the planet. And somehow we have to make changes that will bring that down to zero. It's been constantly going up. It's only various economic changes that have even flattened it at all. So we have to go from rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to zero. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra. But let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3. The second factor is the services we use. This encompasses everything: the food we eat, clothing, TV, heating. These are very good things. Getting rid of poverty means providing these services to almost everyone on the planet. And it's a great thing for this number to go up. In the rich world, perhaps the top 1 billion, we probably could cut back and use less. But every year, this number on average is going to go up. So this is a wish. It's a very concrete wish that we invent this technology. If you gave me only one wish for the next 50 years, I can pick who's president, I can pick a vaccine, which is something I love, or I could pick that this thing that's half the cost with no CO2 gets invented This is the wish I would pick. This is the one with the greatest impact. If we don't get this wish, the division between the people who think short-term and long-term will be terrible, between the U.S. and China, between poor countries and rich, and most of all, the lives of those 2 billion will be far worse.
Who are you?
Bill Gates.
Why do you play bridge?
It's both fun and you learn how to think, you learn strategy. There's great people who play bridge. It's always learning new things no matter how good you get.
What do you suggest to new people who wants to learn?
Well, you can get online and find people. We're going to make it easier to find instructors online. Playing other bridge games like hearts and spades helps a lot. You get a sense of the deck. acbl.org has a learning to play bridge piece of software. So there's more and more ways to find people in your community or just play online.
Do you think the bridge help you in your work?
Well, I think it helps you think in very concrete ways. I played a lot of card games when I was young, and I think that was super. And bridge is sort of the king of all card games.